Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd like to invite you to take just a few moments each to tell us a little bit about yourself and then, of course, why you're running for this position. And we'll flip a coin. That's not true. We're going to start with you.
Okay.
George, take it away.
Okay. Well, my name is George Lareau, and I've worked in the clerk's office pretty much my entire adult life. I started there when I was 19 years old. I worked there 32 years. For the last 19 years, up until November of last year, I was the chief deputy clerk under Cheryl Strickland, and I was responsible for running the office. And I had appointed for the vacancy when Cheryl Strickland resigned early, as well as Mr. Conrad, and for 2 months I was appointed the interim clerk. And I started taking some cost savings measures, thinking it would last until the election. But then I got a call from the governor's office that Mr. Conrad had been chosen, and under Florida law I can't run against my boss, so I resigned November 5th, I believe it was, and been running my campaign ever since.
Excellent. Your turn.
Sure. So again, I'm Hunter Conrad, not Conrad Hunter, but
Thank you.
happy to go by either. And just a little bit about me. I grew up here. I went to Gamble Rogers Middle School and then to Pedro Menendez High School. From there, I went off to North Greenville University in South Carolina. Had an opportunity to play a little football there, but got a degree in accounting while attending North Greenville. Additionally, which I tell everybody was the most important part of that, is I met my wife there and the mother of my 3 children. And so from coming back after North Greenville, I came back and had the opportunity to put my accounting to practice and operated a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization that I was solely responsible for the bill paying, the budgeting, the auditing of that organization. From there, I did a little stint in banking at the former Prosperity Bank before going to law school. Then, of course, I went to law school, graduated, got my Juris Doctorate, and was a prosecutor for several years. Then went into private practice here locally with a law firm. So, and then from there, I was appointed by the governor back in October 30th of 2015. I was appointed. Just so you know a little bit about what we've done in the office, because of course everybody says, well, what have you done then? You've got the appointment now, you're in office currently, what are you doing? And so since I've taken office, some of the things that we have done, we've implemented business-like practices into government. We have created standard operating procedures across the board. We have created formal cross-training measures. We've implemented lean management, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, is the elimination of waste, the identifying and using technology to further resources. And a lot of the reasons we've done that is, as many of you know here, those that are listening, government is getting too big all over. And in our position at the clerk's office, we continue to face budget cuts. When I took office, we got a 3.6% budget cut, and we're on pace to get another 3% budget cut next fiscal year, 16-17. So the purpose of implementing this lean management and employing private sector practices into government is so that we're prepared for what's next. We've gone from, in 1 year, from 104 to 96 employees currently. And so the idea behind this is that we can continue to expand services, have the continuity of services without losing or in spite of the reduction from our state funding. So those are some of the things we've done. We are also getting ready to go online with foreclosures. We are getting ready to expand services back out to the annexes in Ponte Vedra and Julington with the intent to expand to the Southeast Library hopefully by the end of the year. The other 2 should be up and running anytime this month. And we're doing that not because we're spending any more money. How we're doing it is we've collaborated with local government, with your tax collector, Dennis Hollingsworth, and he'll be providing the staffing, we'll be providing the technology. It will not be a full layout of every service. We can't provide that right now. But what we are trying to do is use technology and collaboration with local government to expand those services at no cost to the taxpayer. Ultimately, why I hope to continue to be your clerk and comptroller is because I believe in bringing fiscally conservative values to local government. We are making steps in that direction now, like I said, of implementing business-like practices into local government, and I hope to be able to continue to do the same thing in the next 4 years.
Thank you.
So,
George, Hunter started to touch on why you wanted the job. Why would you want the job?
Well, I've trained for this job my entire life. Hunter also mentioned that he's gone from 104 to, would you say 102?
96.
96 employees, but there were 5 or 6 employees when I left that they had to retire out because they'd met the maximum time, or it was coming up very soon. They'd met their maximum time in the Florida retirement system. So, I mean, this was all planned for, and as far as lean management and some of these practices of cross-training, this is just standard operating procedure, and it has been for years in the clerk's office. Back to the question of why I want it, because I'm fully trained to do it. I'm endorsed by both former clerks, Cheryl Strickland and Bud Markle. I've worked in all the departments in the clerk's office, and I feel like I'm the most qualified person to continue to run the clerk's office. And to dispel one of the rumors out there, I cannot add to my retirement system by winning this election. I chose to retire because I had 32 years in the system. You only need 30. I retired in November last year, and as a result of that, the clerk's office will actually pay less money to the state of Florida if I were to win than if Mr. Conrad were to win, because I'm getting paid by the state a pension regardless of whether I win or lose. So that savings is about $11,000 a year difference between someone who's retired or somebody who's building a retirement. The other thing I did as chief deputy clerk, I mean, when I was appointed the interim clerk, I transitioned from chief deputy clerk to interim clerk. I kept a lot of the administrative duties, but I transferred some of my human resource duties to the human resource director and some of my operational duties to the finance director. And we became more of a team, and I eliminated the chief deputy clerk position. Right now, that chief deputy clerk position has been reinstated under Mr. Conrad's administration, and it's a $90,000 a year job with benefits. It really costs $117,000 a year, with including salary and benefits and insurance and everything that goes along with it, and taxes, and FICA and Medicare. And I would once again eliminate that position, go back to the model that we had when I was the clerk for a very short time. And between these two items I just talked about, that would save taxpayers over $500,000 in just one 4-year term. And I'm already trained to do the job.
If I can respond. Let me just start by saying, because I'm always careful to say this, I have the utmost respect for Ms. Lareau, and anything we say I don't think is personal, because the two of us communicate well and still talk at any of these things. But there are some very clear distinctions that I think have to be drawn. First of all, Ms. Lareau references the retirement, that he's already drawing from a pension, that he'll save the taxpayers money by not drawing from an additional pension or me having to accrue a pension. But you know, that's a problem that we already have in bureaucracy and in government, is we want the benefit, and then once we have it, we don't want anybody else to have it. So I'm going to campaign, and part of my platform is that, well, I've gotten my retirement, and so I'm saving you money that someone else shouldn't be able to receive. So my response to that is, there's a pension that Mr. Lareau already has. And so for him to say, well, I have it, I'm going to save you money because it's a benefit that I've already accrued and that the next clerk shouldn't accrue, I think is a little bit politically disingenuous. Although I understand what Mr. Lareau's trying to say, I don't think it holds any weight. The second part, the chief deputy position, I find a little bit more disturbing, because it's a position that my opponent held for 20 years. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say the position wasn't necessary and I eliminated it after 20 years, because ultimately what you're saying is, well, the position wasn't needed for 20 years at what was over $100,000 a year salary. It no longer is. And so I essentially used taxpayers' money, wasted taxpayers' money for 20 years. You can't have it both ways. You either have to say the position wasn't necessary, I needed it, I didn't need it, and taxpayer used their money, or I'm saying it for politically expedient purposes and saying I'm going to save your money that way. I think the chief deputy position is an important position. I asked Mr. Lareau to stay there as my chief deputy, which I understand his position in deciding to run. But to use as a platform as chief deputy and retirement, I just don't think they hold any weight when challenged.
Well, they hold a financial weight of over $500,000 in just one term. And I'm not saying the job I held as chief deputy was unnecessary by any means. What I'm saying is I took those duties and distributed them amongst other directors that are on the payroll already. And since I had been there so long, anytime the clerk wasn't there, I was acting as the clerk. So I knew what duties to keep and what duties I could administer amongst the staff. And that's where experience comes in.
And you didn't hire yourself either as
I did
chief
not hire
deputy,
myself.
So, I mean, that would be something that his predecessor.
Right. Cheryl Strickland.
So Cheryl
appointed
hired him, and he kind of acts the position. But I understand what both you guys are saying. You didn't agree?
Yeah, I'm sure you both have heard the conversations around this race. George came to the position with many years of experience, and you were something of an unknown. Can you tell us why you can step in and why a voter might feel comfortable asking you to take this position?
Absolutely, and let me start with, I think this goes back to the appointment process. I think that's the elephant in the room every time we speak. Everybody wants to know, how did this appointment happen? You were the outsider, you were not in the office. And so before I get into the appointment process, let me identify the two main functions of the clerk's office. Now, don't be mistaken, there's dozens and hundreds of other ministerial functions that the clerk's office provides, but the two main functions we provide are the legal custodian of the records, which encompasses nearly 1,000 statutory functions and is growing almost daily, but certainly yearly as the legislature enacts new laws. That's the first thing. Number two, most people, and I think even Mr. Lareau would probably agree with this, most people don't even recognize in the community at large, I won't say in this room or other local officials, but in the community at large, that we are the comptroller, the CFO of the county. We audit the county, we pay the county's bills, we inventory the assets. So from a professional standpoint, I'm an accountant and a lawyer. I understand both of those, how they operate, and how they operate at a macro level in an organization, and how that trickles down to the rest of the organization. Switching gears back to the appointment process, several people have said, well, and even my opponent has suggested, it's backdoor politics are ruining St. Johns County, and let's not let political favors get in the way of local government. I'm here today specifically to address those words from my opponent's camp specifically, but start by saying it's an honor and a privilege to serve in this capacity. Whether it be me or my opponent, he would concur that it's a privilege to be able to serve the community. But here's how the appointment process works. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer every question about this appointment process possible, because there is so much misinformation. And I don't think it's the intent of anyone to misinform. I think it's just misinformation that people may not be familiar with. August of last year, August 1st, I announced my intent to run. Whether Mr. Lareau got the appointment or I got the appointment, that was prior to the previous clerk's resignation. August 18th, my predecessor announced that she was going to resign effective September 18th, thereby giving the governor's office 30 days to make a decision. For any of you who may be familiar with the appointment process, whether it be in clerk's offices or other constitutionally held offices, the position is almost never filled in 30 days. As a matter of fact, there's been 4 or 5 clerks in the past 2 years that have been appointed. I think maybe one of them was done that quickly. I think the other ones were 6-7 months before the governor appointed the predecessor to the resigning clerk. So my predecessor resigned. A lot of people don't realize, because of the comptroller nature of our job, someone must fill that position immediately. If the governor is not prepared at that point to fill the vacancy, the judge from Daytona, the chief judge of our circuit, who's housed in Volusia, will then temporarily appoint a caretaker until the governor makes a decision. It is completely within the law and under the governor's purview to announce appointments. He does over 1,000 of them every single year. So 30 days go by, the governor has not named an appointment. Part of that process is you fill out applications. Both of us solicited letters from the community, constituents of ours, friends, people we've grown up with, other elected officials. They write letters to the governor. All of this subject to public record requests. I would encourage anyone to go and look at the letters who are written on behalf of both of us. At that point, a temporary caretaker is placed by the chief judge until the governor makes his decision. I can speak for both of us when I say both of us were interviewed by the governor. I was interviewed in Tallahassee. I believe Mr. Lareau was interviewed in the southern part of the state based on our previous conversations. And then the governor hears from the community. He looks at your education, he looks at your credentials, he looks at your qualifications, he looks at your philosophies, and then the governor of the state of Florida makes a CEO decision who he believes is best prepared and suited to lead the office for the foreseeable future. So that's the appointment process. That's the way it works. And certainly any follow-up questions to that, I'm happy to field.
Jordan, do you have any reply to that?
I do. And I do agree with the majority of that, but I'm not a politician, never really wanted to be. This whole procedure was new to me, but I do know Cheryl Strickland gave a lot more than 30 days notice to the governor. She actually went to Tallahassee to meet with the governor, and he rejected her meeting and said you can put it in writing and meet with my appointments division. And he had a lot of notice for this, but regardless, when I met with the governor, I had to be down in Cape Canaveral at, I believe it was 7 o'clock in the morning, to meet him in a restaurant, and I got about a 5-minute interview, and I could tell he really was not interested in interviewing me. It was just something that he had to do. And I have not been a political person. I've never helped the governor raise money. I've never helped on his campaign. I was not a member of the Republican Executive Committee. I was a worker. I was working in the clerk's office, making sure everything was done right. There's never been a negative complaint about the clerk's office published in any newspaper the entire time I've worked there. The entire time I was the chief deputy, we've earned the Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Finance Officers Association the entire 19 years. It's not because I'm an accountant, because I'm not, but the finance department is run by a CPA, and being an attorney in a clerk's office, in my opinion, is no help at all, because it's actually illegal for an attorney to give legal advice to any of the customers coming into the clerk's office. So as far as qualifications, I think, think about your own jobs, and the people out there watching this, think about your own careers. Were you better at the very beginning, or were you better after 10, 20, 30 years? And that's why I don't understand why I wasn't considered, because the governor did not have to make a decision. The order that was written by Judge Perkins said, this order shall stand until the next election or until the governor decides to make an election, if he does, basically. It's not exactly that language, but he chose to do this after the fact, after I was already serving as clerk, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with the way the office was running. Cheryl Strickland did a great job, and Bud Markle did a great job before her, and they were the ones that trained me. So I felt like it was the decision was made up long before I had my 5-minute interview.
Did you want to respond to something there?
Yeah, there was just a few things that I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I'm happy to get as much in the weeds as anybody wants to about the appointment process. We were both given the same opportunity. We both interviewed with the governor. To suggest that it's some kind of political gerrymandering would just be factually inaccurate, with nothing to support it other than one person didn't get the position they may or may not felt that they should have gotten. That being said, let me respond to the notice part. Maybe the governor had notice prior to me getting notice or anybody else, and that certainly may be true, but the public received notice on August 18th, and that's when they started accepting applications. So that's when I received official notice. As far as the insinuations that my opponent didn't help the governor raise money, or I didn't do any of that. I didn't know the governor before my interview. I'd never spoken to him. I met with him on September 21st at 4 o'clock in Tallahassee, and that was my first official interaction with him ever. I hadn't seen him at one other event, but I never raised him any money. I never worked on his campaign. I didn't know him. I didn't know one person in his office. And so the misinformation of, well, I must have known somebody in the governor's office. We both had community leaders, constituents, citizens weigh in. Both of us did from within the community. And the governor looked at us and made a hiring decision. But the truth of the matter is, now we're beyond that. I've been in office coming up on almost a year, and I'm looking forward to continuing to providing solutions to the office. That's what we've been doing. And sure, my opponent will say, well, we did some of those things. Maybe so, but all I can tell you is that we're improving in every area with less resources than we had before I took office, and with what are going to be less resources in the coming year.
Just out of curiosity, how long was your meeting with Governor Scott? Do you recall?
My interview was between 30 and 45 minutes in Tallahassee.
Okay.
But weren't you already friends with Travis Hudson? And weren't you introduced to Adam Putnam?
I've never met Adam Putnam.
By Dennis Hollingsworth?
Never met Adam Putnam in my life.
Okay.
Never once. Was I friends with Travis Hudson?
Yeah.
Senator Hudson? I certainly was, just like my opponent was friends and worked for Mrs. Strickland and Mr. Markle and the same people that started. And that's what I'm getting at here is that it wants to be spun in a way that's just not accurate. Here are the facts. Here is the way the process happened according to the law. And I'm not here to complain about the process. I'm happy to answer any questions, but to suggest that, well, Senator Hudson wrote me a letter and Judge so-and-so wrote my opponent a letter, and I don't see how that, the governor of the state of Florida is not going to make an appointment of an executive position based on strictly political favors. It's just not going to happen in the #1 county in the state of Florida and many measurable facts and data. He's going to look at the candidates. He's going to hear from the community. Certainly, had the community resoundingly supported my opponent, he wouldn't have appointed me. But there were community leaders that supported both of us. And after interviewing us, hearing us, speaking to us, looking at our qualifications, our philosophies on government, our vision for the future, he made an informed decision as the executive of the state of Florida. And I can tell you, I don't shy away from appreciating our governor and what he's done. He's not perfect. No person in elected office is perfect. He hasn't made perfect decisions. But he is a 2-time elected governor, and I'm certainly happy to have his endorsement and support in this race.
You have in one of your bios that your intention is to make the clerk's office customer-driven and financially responsible. Does that infer that it's not financially responsible or not customer-driven right now?
No, my point in saying customer-driven and financially responsible is always is improving. What can we do? So one of the things that was done prior to taking office, and I'm sure like any other reason, there is a reason for it, but the customer windows where you come in and you pay your tickets, your court fines, traffic's a separate division, but you have your misdemeanor, family, felony, where you go and pay. Those were removed and placed back in. So what we did when taking office is we cross-trained those employees from our family departments, our civil departments, and our criminal departments and brought them back out to windows that were otherwise vacant. And the point is, not saying, oh, this is fantastic, but it's when you walk into the building, there's a customer-friendly feel. You can come over here to the person as opposed to walking down a hall and going into a door and having to find them. There's somebody right there who can help you. Financially responsible, I'm not saying that my predecessor was financially irresponsible, but let's be very frank that it's a large portion of our responsibility to provide oversight to the county commission. And so my intent in doing that is to continue to remain financially responsible, being prepared to deal with the legislative cuts that are facing us in the coming years, that we faced this past year, that were faced in years past, and to continue to do that.
George, what were your plans to improve the office? You mentioned that you had started doing some work toward that.
Well,
What's
I
your vision?
knew about the upcoming cuts on the court portion of the clerk's budget, and that's the main reason I did away with the chief deputy position, is to just streamline the office and reduce our budget. But some of the things that I would like to do is to transfer some of the folks that receive documents, court documents for the most part. We receive all those electronically now from attorneys, and we get them over the internet. So the internet's available in Ponte Vedra and Jolington Creek just like it is in the courthouse. So I would like to relocate a couple of people that have the duty of importing documents, checking them, putting them in the system to those Ponte Vedra and Jolington Creek locations, so when a customer comes in and needs help on a court-related issue such as a traffic ticket, that they would be there to provide additional service. Also, I think the biggest service that's needed in Ponte Vedra and Jolington Creek is to have a passport presence there. We used to, but when the budgets got really tight around 2005, 2006, the local budget for the clerk that you can do these extra services with is the recording department, where you record the deeds and mortgages and liens, and the clerk has to keep a little bit of the money for the recording to run their office. Well, when the county's booming like it's doing now, there's money coming in. Anything not spent goes back to the Board of County Commissioners to offset property taxes. And it's always been a lot of money, except for in 05 and 06 when property wasn't changing hands at a very fast rate, and the budget decreased a lot. So we had to close our Ponte Vedra and Julington Creek annexes at that time. But I would definitely approach the Board of County Commissioners for space in the annexes and relocate a couple of our existing staff up there to increase services for those folks in those communities.
And if I may respond to that, Mr. Sutton. So, and let me just draw a distinction here between myself and my opponent. I think that doing that is creating the same problem that we had in 05-06. As the economy grows and as there's money, we expand services, we pay for more government. I think that's a problem that we have across government now. And so I don't intend to take more revenues that can be sent back to the general revenue fund to decrease local taxes to expand services back out there. The way I'm suggesting that we do it, and that I can tell you quite frankly is already in motion and in process, is collaborating with local government who already have the available staff. Now it won't be, passports will not be available immediately. We haven't crossed that bridge, but you will have the opportunity to clear up traffic fines out there. And the purpose of doing it that way is to think outside of the box. If we continue to think inside of the box, this is the way we did it before, it's got to work again, we're going to end up in the same problem that we did 10 years ago, because St. Johns County is great. I'm a product of St. Johns County. I'm raising a family here, but at some point the growth will slow down. And if we're not prepared and we don't have an alternative idea on how to address that, whether that be in 3 years or 8 years, we're going to be back in the same box we were 7 years ago, closing the annexes again and saying revenues have dried up. So I'm suggesting we do it without paying, using $1 of taxpayers' dollar.
I'm trying to, let me ask you this, because I'm trying to clear this up. Both of you want to open up the offices.
Right.
The annexes are already there.
They're already there.
They're paid for. Is the difference you want to use Dennis Hollingsworth's staff to do clerk's work, and you want clerks to do clerk's work?
Absolutely.
And here's the difference.
I mean, I'm just, is that correct? That's what I'm trying, because I'm trying to understand.
Somewhat, yes. So what we're doing is collaborating with their office. And so what would happen is you would come in, let's say you live in the Ponte Vedra area and you've got a traffic issue and you go to renew your license and say, well, you've got to hold on it, you've got a ticket. It gives them the ability, with our systems, our technology, we've provided them with frequently asked questions to be able to do this, to look at it and say, okay, here's the issue, here's the ticket you're going to pay, we'll take payment on clerk's software and be able to do it this way. So yes, they will provide somewhat of a clerk function. But I can tell you, we've already gone through the legal rigmarole, if you will. There's nothing outside the bounds that prevents us from doing this. And part of it is thinking outside of the box. If we don't think outside the box, we're going to be in the same situation that we were. And so the other thing that I would say about the annexes is, with all due respect to my opponent, he says I'm a part of the management decisions for the past 19 years, and I respect that. Again, I think a lot of him. I asked him to stay on board. I think he's competent. This is not a matter of competency. But if that's the case, why didn't they do it last year, or the year before, or the year before that, or the year before that? And I would suggest he's going to say, well, it wasn't my decision. That would be the clerk's decision. And my response would be, you can't have it both ways. It was, you either take credit for management decisions or you don't. And so the revenues were there to do it prior, and all of a sudden when we're doing it, it's already being done, and we're doing it in a different manner than how it's been done in the past. Now my opponent will say, well, I want to do the same thing in a different manner.
Well, I really wouldn't reply that way, because it's just recent that the revenues have come back in the recording department. If you look back a couple of years, it wasn't obvious that we could reopen these departments and still have a surplus at the end of the budget year. But my point to all this gets down to experience of knowing where the money comes from to run your office. And the courts are run by the state. They're funded by the state. The clerk of court has a state budget, and traffic is considered a state court budget. So if he's having Dennis Hollingsworth do his job, Dennis Hollingsworth is doing it with county money, because any extra money Dennis Hollingsworth spends is less money he turns back to the taxpayers of St. Johns County to offset our property taxes. My plan would have the clerks in Ponte Vedra and Julington Creek getting paid by my state budget, which is what the law requires. And also, I know you said you've checked it out, but I've checked it out also. Chapter 28 is the Clerk of Court's chapter in the Florida statutes, and if you look at it, there's nowhere in there that it allows any other agency to process traffic tickets other than the clerk of the court. It's your responsibility, and who's going to take the blame when things go wrong? It needs to be your office, and you need to have the rules in place to process tickets and have the people in place to process tickets. That's just my opinion.
I mean, there's nothing really response. We can go back and forth about this issue all day long. We have two different ways of approaching it. I believe my way works. He believes he wants to do it a different way, and that's, obviously that's going to be left up to the voter on August 30th.
The nice thing is, either way, we're going to expand services to Ponte Vedra and Juniata Creek. It sounds like you might want to do traffic right away. Traffic's not a big priority to me because there's already a link on the clerk's website, and I think just about everybody in Ponte Vedra and Juniata Creek has a computer and can click on the link to pay their traffic ticket. What we need in Ponte Vedra and Juniata Creek is a place for people to go get their passports. 90% of the people that come into the clerk's office are from those locations. So to provide a service closer to them, I think would be much more well received than to provide them with an opportunity to come in and talk to somebody about how do I click on this link to pay a traffic ticket.
Okay. You say also that you're going to work diligently to implement private sector practices in the clerk's office. Can you give examples of how that's not happening and what it is you would do?
Absolutely. So it is happening now because I've been in office almost a year, and we started doing it when I took office. Part of that is lean management. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with what that means, but it's eliminating waste. And eliminating waste is not just cutting a position. That's a very narrow view of how you do things. I can give you multiple examples of what we've done so far, but one simple example would be that we've worked with other agencies as they provide documentation to us, be that the state attorney's office, the public defender's office. They continue to submit documents to us, whether that be warrants or whether that be case files. They submit those to our office and we review them. There was a return rate, and I want to say it was nearly 50%. And that doesn't mean 50% of their documents were wrong. But what it means is our employees are looking at this and they're having to send it back because information is missing. Now, it seems very insignificant, okay, send it back. Well, what we've done is provided now a checklist and say, before you send us the information, we've sat down with these agencies and said, before you send us the information, here's a checklist attached. We want it attached on everything document that you send us to make sure that these are there. And so what that does is it makes them check the box every single time for the 6 or 8 documents that are required for whatever filing that may or may not be. So then when it comes in, what was created before of someone maybe just overlooking the work, now they've got to be able to say, okay, I've checked the box, the work is here, the work is here, the document is here, the document is here. So when that's sent to us, that eliminates inefficiencies from their end onto our end. What does that do for us? It eliminates waste on our time where we have to sit, our clerks have to sit and look at it and say, okay, we're missing these documents again and we've got to go back through them. That's one example of bringing private sector practice. Another example is the cross-training. Standard operating procedures. There were not standard operating procedures. There was no knowledge repository of information so that as we, as employees leave and as our funding continues to be taken away from us at the state level, someone can step up to the plate without institutional knowledge of 20 or 30 years and be able to say, okay, I'm a new hire, or I've been here a year, this person had 20 or 30 years of experience, they're now gone, I need to know how to do it so I can look at this document and do that. What that does is it replaces the time that they're having to go to someone else and ask those questions. So lean management, private sector practices, thinking outside the box to bring expanding services through the use of technology, those are all ideas of private sector practices that weren't in the office prior to me being there.
I'd like to say that this person that you have running the office is filling you with a whole bunch of things that happen regularly.
Let me interrupt for just a second.
I think
he's not running the office, I run the office.
But you're never there to run the office.
That's not true either.
Well,
are you there?
I'm not running the office.
So how would you know if I'm there?
Because your employees are telling me you're hardly ever there.
Okay.
But the point here is,
it's not factually measured.
We'll give you a second to respond. Just go ahead and finish.
The point is that changing procedures and coming up with better ways of doing things at the clerk's office, that happens. It happens all the time. It's nothing new. It happens weekly, and it always has. There's always better ways to do things, and we're always coming up with better ways to do things. And as far as saying that there was no procedures, and that's just they're telling you lies if that's what they're telling you, Hunter. It's an outright lie, and I'll tell you why. There were two people in my office that knew how to do payroll, and it's our HR director and me. And I'm not talking about all the work that goes into creating the payroll. I'm talking about generating the actual payroll. Every once in a while, I'm talking only once a year, maybe twice a year, on payroll day, maybe the HR director was sick. I would go in her office, above her desk, pull out her manual, and go to the procedure manual for running payroll. And it's a complicated procedure through Penimation. And I could go step by step, and I would run the payroll. So to say that we never had any procedures, there may have been a need to update some procedures. I wouldn't dispute that, because technology changes, things change all the time, and it's always something going on. But to say that that's something new and great and fantastic, it's just part of the job. It's part of the job that has been going on for years.
Okay, I think you want to respond to.
No, I don't really have anything to respond to that. It's, they weren't there, they weren't in place, they are now. Maybe there were some procedures, but I can just tell you, they weren't there. I mean, I'm in the office, I've been there now for a year, but what I still have not heard, and we can disagree with what I'm bringing to the table of business practices and lien management and expanding foreclosures, going online, expanding services back to the annexes. These are all measurable, identifiable facts that I've done in the first 10 months. And with all due respect to my opponent, the only things I've heard are, I didn't get the appointment, I'm going to eliminate a position that I held for 20 years, and I should have the job because I'm more experienced. I value his experience. He's knowledgeable, and I would have liked for him to stay there, but I still haven't heard any solutions, what he's going to do to improve, other than what I've already said.
Well, if I could expand a little bit. We haven't talked about some of the things that you have done, such as signing a contract for a jury management program that costs $47,000 a year, and now instead of mailing summons out for 47 cents, you're going to be paying $2.94 plus postage for a company in Canada to mail out your juror summons. And there's a $3,000 a year maintenance fee in this program. I looked at this program 2 years ago, I looked at this program 5 years ago, and when you do the math, it just doesn't add up. We have, when I left, and the whole 15, 20 years that I was the chief deputy, we had one part-time person doing jury management. The other part, she was a full 40-hour person, but she worked in traffic as well. So to take a duty of summoning jurors that only costs one part-time person's salary and to change it into a program that includes software and barcode scanning, and all this stuff sounds nice when you go to a clerk's conference and people demo their software and they make it seem like, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then of course Flagler County was asked to be to mentor you so they could teach you how to be the clerk, and Flagler County had just put in this system. Well, it may have made sense for them, but Flagler County has been behind St. Johns County in technology for years. Matter of fact, St. Johns County gets visitors from the state of Florida regularly so they can see how we do things and how do we do so much with so little, and how do we process court documents in the court so when they leave the court, the defendants already have all their paperwork, everything's docketed on the computer, and the attorneys can be sitting in their office and they know what happened live. Our technology above Flagler County has been very, very much better. And to take advice from another county and just go out and spend $50,000 of taxpayers' money just because you think it might be better, I think was a bad move. And that's the jury part. And then then you talked about implementing bidding for foreclosures online. We've looked at that for 10 years. And the trend is, amongst other clerks in Florida who have tried it, they've now gone back to doing online. They've now gone back to doing foreclosure bidding in person because they were having a lot of internet scams. A lot of people would not follow through with their payment. They were having to re-advertise and rehold sales. And even Dennis Hollingsworth, right here in our county, did tax deeds electronically, and now he's back to doing it manually because there were so many issues. So I'd encourage you to do a little more research rather than just take the opinion of some other clerks that this stuff is all new and great, because it may be different, but it may not be as good as what you already had. When we had a jury in, we summoned 275 jurors to yield 125. Now, some get excused because of their age, some get excused because they had a good reason, they're single mother, whatever. There's a lot of excuses that are legitimate. About 10% of the jurors just don't show up. So if you're going to summon 275 jurors and yield 125, 275 jurors at less than 50 cents a summons, it's about $137.50 at the most. Now you're going to be paying $294 plus postage. That's over $1,000 every time you call a jury. Am I right? Isn't that the price? It's $294 plus postage.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's uncalled for. Where right now, a juror comes in, they meet the clerk, and they say, first of all, they're confused. They probably haven't had jury duty before. I'm in the right place. What do I need to do? And we says, yes, just make sure your juror summons is signed. We'll check you in. There's coffee over there. Please have a seat in the jury lounge, and the judge will be with you shortly. And it's more of a personal touch, and it's cheaper, and I just think it's much better. I wouldn't have done
Of course, like to respond to that again. Something that we've done. I still go back to this. My opponent wants to keep going back, but he hasn't suggested anything that he's going to do. What is he going to do? We're going to go back now. We're going to continue to go back. So let me respond for just a second, though, to the jury's software. Without trying to get too complicated, there's one fund that is able to pay for the software and the maintenance. The intention of using that fund is because there's money sitting in that fund that doesn't go through our state budget. And what that does is it will reduce the salary of one employee and allow us to shift her to another place, so that thereby half of her salary will be court salary, where we're feeling the impact at the state level. The other half would be shifted into a county function where she can step up and fill a function of another employee that's left. So there is a cost-benefit analysis. That's not proved. It's not true to just say, well, it's just going to cost more. That's not accurate. We should be able to shift part of an employee's salary to another position because we're using her at a reduced rate in that position. So the foreclosures online, let me reference those as well. To say the trend is to go away, I don't know if that's true or not. What I can tell you is we're the last county in our circuit to put foreclosures online. I think it's a valuable service. I think it provides a convenience to people. Are there possibilities of things, of the internet going down, of there being issues? Of course, anything that we deal with, and both of us can agree on this, look, anything that we do, anything that we suggest, anything that we come up with or that we collectively come up with our staff, there's going to be problems with. That's just the nature of it. It's not necessarily this is going to cause a problem or that's going to cause a problem, because to this point it hasn't caused a problem. We've moved forward in every area in the office in the past year. Now it's a matter of, do you want to go back to the previous administration or do you want to move forward? I don't think we've done anything at this point that would lead anybody to believe we're going backwards. We still don't have negative articles written in the paper about the clerk's office for failure to provide services. We're at reduced funding. We're improving in the office. That's not a slap or a knock on my predecessor or his role in the office. As I repeat again, I respect him and what he did and how he ran, but we're beyond that now. And so I still haven't heard anything that says, here's how I want to improve the office. What I've heard is, well, we already had those and we're constantly improving. I'm giving you objectively measurable things that I think we can do. And then we can debate about whether or not this idea or that idea is best, but I'm telling you, this is what I'm bringing to the table. Here's what I'm doing. I'm going to try to use technology, outside the box thinking, private sector practices, a business approach to government. And then the people will get to decide they want that or they want the way it was done before. And I leave it in their hands. But I can tell you for the past year, we too have received numerous compliments, phone calls. Things are better, things are improving from lawyers, from people that use the office. So to suggest that things are getting worse is just factually inaccurate and can't be measured by anything other than money missing, which is not happening.
Okay, we sort of round things up now. What we like to do at the end is just ask both of you, is there any question that we haven't asked you that you'd like to take up before we have to wind up?
I don't think of any.
No, I don't think so. I think we've addressed, the issues I think people are concerned with, the appointment process, the annexes, the saving taxpayers' money, where we're going. I think we've covered everything, unless any of you have any further questions.
No, can you each take a minute and tell us why someone watching would maybe cast a ballot for you?
We start
Sure.
with you, George.
Yes. I have to keep going back to my experience and knowing what works, what doesn't work, what's required, and what is not required. If there's an issue and a problem with some portion of the clerk's office, then of course we look for solutions. But if things are simple and working, then there's not always a need to change for the newest and best software. But I'm endorsed by Cheryl Strickland and Bud Markle because I know the job and I know what it takes, and I know the players in the community, and I would continue to do the good job that the previous clerks have done based on my experience and my training.
Well, I'll just start by reiterating, and both of us would agree this, it's a privilege to be able to serve an elected office. I can tell you that it was not my plan as an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old lawyer, 18-year-old in high school or a 25-year-old lawyer to all of a sudden become the clerk and comptroller. As it happens, that's where I sit today, and I'm honored to be able to serve in that capacity. I grew up here, I'm raising a family here, and what I'm concerned with is that for generations to come, that we consider the needs that are going to come for those that come after us and that those that follow after them. So it's a privilege and an honor to serve. I will continue to serve in a manner that's consistent with fiscally conservative policies, bringing business practices to local government. We've been doing it now for the past year. As the clerk and comptroller, I'm the only one that has sat in the seat and has been responsible for any length of time. And so we'll continue to improve. In the way of endorsements, we both have endorsements. I have endorsements from multiple clerks around the state. That'll be coming out soon from Dennis Hollingsworth, our tax collector, from Senator Hudson, Representative Stephen, Representative Renner, all people that are involved in our community and who have been elected by our community to serve them and their constituents. So I say that not to say that endorsements are everything. Endorsements are nice. They're a feature. There's a difference between a benefit and a feature. A feature is something that's nice to be able to say, these people support me. The Realtors Association supports me. The Police Benevolent Association supports me, and all of those that I just listed. But that's a feature of our campaigns. He has the former clerk supporting him, and I have multiple clerks in office now across the state that are supporting me. But what's the benefit? And what I try to tell people, the benefit is you're going to have a fiscal conservative who has been involved in this community in multiple civic organizations, who has served, who will continue to serve, someone who is an accountant and a lawyer that understands the impacts of every decision that's made in the office, not just internally but externally as well. And I would ask the people of St. Johns County to consider that and give me the same trust and confidence that Governor Scott gave me, and to vote for me on August 30th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tony, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you all.
for being here.
Appreciate it.
That was elucidating.